God. Daddy, I want to eat. I want to eat. I want to eat. Daddy, I want to eat.
Hey everybody, Adam and Lana here with Hometown Acres. Welcome back. We are a couple thousand miles away from the property. A little bit different style video today. I've never been, well, you've never been on a cruise before. It's been 19 years since I've been on a cruise. The last time I was on one when I was 13. I am 32 now. This is going to be kind of special because my parents are here, both of my sisters, their husbands, and their kids are here. Anderson is here with us. Josie, only being a year old, we left her at home with Lana's parents to watch her. So it should be enjoyable to let Anderson spend a week with his cousins and the whole family to get to be together again. And if you've never been on a cruise before, hopefully this will give you an idea of what this type of vacation is like. But I fondly remember it from being 13 as one of my favorite vacations of all time. So we'll see how it turns out and bring you guys along. All right, so as we're pulling out of the port of Miami, I want to tell you how we're going to organize this video because there's so much to cover. When it comes to cruises, there's so much to do. It's actually hard to see and do everything in 7 days. But I'm going to try to break down everything into different sections for the purposes of this video. First, we'll talk about all the different things that there are to do on the boat. And then we'll talk about the food because typically cruises are all-inclusive minus alcohol. And then we'll talk about what ports we stopped at and what excursions we did. And then we'll talk about what a vacation like this might cost. And you may be surprised, it may not be as expensive as you would think. The last cruise ship in the port of Miami was the new Virgin Scarlet Lady, which I thought was a pretty cool looking ship. Definitely different branding than you see on most of the other cruise ships. Thought it was worth capturing here and putting it in. Worth mentioning, the cruise line that we're traveling, if you haven't picked up on it yet, is Royal Caribbean, and we are on Oasis of the Seas. Now, unfortunately, as you can see when we're leaving out of Miami here, it was rainy and windy and probably about 68 degrees, so not a great day to pull out of port. Miami's obviously a lot more beautiful than this most of the time. And here's just a testament to how big these ships are. With even as rough as it is right now, you still don't feel any of that movement. And as you work your way inside the boat, you almost forget that you're on a ship and in the middle of the ocean. It feels like a floating city. I mean, they've got a carousel in the back here. This is the main boardwalk in the back of the ship. This is actually open to the outside, so when it rains outside, it rains on this boardwalk as well. But in this section back here, there's a sugar shack with candy for the kids. There's a Johnny Rockets, which has old-fashioned cheeseburgers, french fries, and milkshakes. And then there's a sports bar called Playmakers with all the flat-screen TVs to stay up to date on all your sporting events. In the center of the ship, there's yet another area that is open to the outdoors. This is called Central Park. As you can see, plenty of lush greenery, plants, shrubs, and trees. They all get watered from the rain when it rains outside. Pretty cool little area, little restaurants, coffee shops. Pretty cool place to hang out if you're looking for a little bit of a quieter area to hang out. And then in the very center of the ship, they have the Royal Promenade, which has a pizza place, some shops, a bar, a comedy club, and the Cafe Promenade, which serves coffee, dessert, and sandwiches. As we make our way down to the bottom of the ship, they actually have their very own casino on board. And what I thought was interesting about this is even if you have any big winnings while you are at sea in international waters, your winnings, unfortunately, are still subject to income tax. There's no getting around Uncle Sam here, unfortunately. Back up on the top deck, here's a look at what the pool situation looks like, the water slides, hot tubs. Here's another look at what Central Park looks like from up above. And this is the other side. Again, there's a pool with a volleyball net, hot tubs, and then this is the splash pad for any little ones. Anderson took full advantage of this. This was his favorite place on the ship. Water slides, stuff to splash around in. Just a great place to let him run around. It's all fenced in with just one entrance, so you know as long as you put them inside and they don't come out that one entrance, they're not going to be able to run away and get lost. There's lifeguards on duty keeping an eye on everybody. Really no risk of drowning here because there's not anything deeper than a couple of inches. But yeah, great place to let the kids be on their own, a little bit of independence while you sit back in a Chase lounge and enjoy some peace and quiet if you're traveling with kids. If you're lucky enough to be traveling without kids, they do have an adult section only, 18 and older. This is called the Salarium. Basically just a much quieter, more peaceful environment. No kids, smaller pools, smaller hot tubs, and a very relaxing place to hang out. Now the solarium is in the front of the ship, which would be the most windy place on the boat when you're underway. So it's completely enclosed by these windows with a few small cutouts to keep some fresh air in there, to keep it from getting too hot like a greenhouse, but not enough wind that it's going to blow your hat off if you're just sitting there relaxing. There is a sun pad on the front of the solarium that allows you to overlook the bow of the ship with spectacular views of the open ocean and almost kind of makes you feel like you're at the helm of the ship. On the back of the ship, they've got so much going on. They've got these flow riders. They have two of these. You can either boogie board or surf like this gentleman here is doing. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like watching the guys that are good on this thing. I like watching the people that are trying to learn and watching the ones who eat it pretty good. Also on the back of the ship, we've got the zip line. This is directly over top of the boardwalk that we were at earlier with the carousel and is about 10 or 12 stories tall. And there's also a full miniature golf course on the back of the ship as well if you've got young kids. There's also a full-size basketball court in the back of the ship that they set up for different activities throughout your cruise. Right now they've got it set up for pickleball, but they can also set it up for volleyball, which we did get to take advantage of one night. I think I've mentioned before, you guys know I played volleyball in college, so did my sister, and her 11-year-old son is in the process of starting his volleyball career right now, so this was kind of a cool moment. I got to pass it, my sister set it, and my nephew got to swing at it. There's also a walking track. On previous cruises we've been on, these were on the upper deck. They have moved it down to the lower deck on the back of the ship. But as you walk around the back of the boat, you've got beautiful views of whatever port you're pulling into, or when you're at sea, you can get really close down to where the propellers are churning the water out of the back of the boat, which is very cool to watch as well. The track is 2.5 laps to make 1 full mile, so it's a little bit larger than your standard high school track, which is 4 laps to make 1 mile. In addition to the walking track, there is a full gym on board as well. I know most people are going on here to stuff their faces, but if you are a health-conscious individual, there's a place here you can burn off some of those extra calories and not feel so guilty. Now, after dinner each night, there's a number of different entertainment options you can go to, different types of shows. They have an 80s themed aqua show. You can see they start out here with a little Back to the Future hoverboard action. And then they do a little synchronized high diving, which was pretty cool. The cool thing about this pool that they're diving into is the floor on it actually raises and lowers so they can dance on top of it as well as dive into it. And you can see here the floor is actually lowering it to turn it from a floor back into a pool. The nice thing is it's entertaining for all ages. Here you can see it's good enough to keep the attention of my 3-year-old son as well as my 68-year-old dad. And if the weather conditions are just right, they'll actually start doing some really high dives, as you can see here. And I think everybody's favorite part of the show was these 2 slackliners. Just the amount of balance and athleticism it took to do what these guys are doing was very impressive to watch. I know I keep mentioning this, but it's crazy to think that you keep forgetting that you're at sea. I mean, these guys are jumping off of, I don't know, 40, 50-foot high dives, and we are in the middle of the ocean with wind. The boat is moving at an average speed of about 24 miles an hour, and these guys are jumping off of high dives into a teeny tiny pool. Here's a quick look at what the pool deck looks like at night when it's not so crowded. A lot of the hot tubs are still open, but they do close the pools at night. Another after dinner show you have available to go see is some figure skating. Still pretty wild to think that they've got a full-blown ice rink in the middle of a cruise ship out in the Caribbean. Again, this kind of thing isn't really my cup of tea, but when you're on vacation, you like to go see things you normally wouldn't go see, and it's already included, so why not? A really cool thing was my two nephews actually got pre-selected to be a part of the show, so they got to go out in the middle, ride in this swan, and be a part of the show. This is definitely something they'll probably remember for the rest of their lives. In addition to the ice rink, they have a full-blown theater called the Royal Theater that they put on shows at that you can go see after dinner. Again, I'm not really a theater-going guy, but it is interesting to see this kind of stuff every once in a while. And one night they did put on a Broadway performance of Cats the Musical. Luckily for me, Anderson was being rather cranky this evening, and I got to leave about 15 minutes into the show. If you're into this type of thing, the performance I'm sure was excellent, but it's just not my cup of tea. One last thing you want to make sure you don't miss is the belly flop competition. All right, so I think that covers just about everything there is to do on the ship. I know there's things that I'm forgetting that I didn't get footage of, like there's a rock climbing wall and other stuff. Again, too much to see in just 7 days, but those are some of the highlights. So let's start talking about some of our destinations. We had 4 ports of call. Our first stop was in Nassau, Bahamas. You can see we were parked right next to a carnival ship that actually had a roller coaster on their top deck, which was pretty cool to watch. As you get off the ship, you get to see all the other boats in port and kind of compare them size-wise. It's pretty cool to see them all side by side. In port that day was our Royal Caribbean Oasis of the Seas. There was 2 Carnival ships and a Norwegian Cruise Line ship in there as well. And you can see the Oasis of the Seas was the largest in port that day. So we got day passes to Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville Beachfront Resort, which had a lazy river, some water slides, a lot of stuff for the kids to do and keep them occupied for the day, as well as access to the beach, which allowed us to do a little bit of snorkeling and swimming in the waves and go check out some cool wildlife underwater. The biggest thing I wanted to do while we were here was actually get out into the ocean and swim in some of that crystal clear Caribbean water. And right here, I took the GoPro out with me, and you can see we're probably in 10, 12 foot of water, and you can just see how clear that water is. And I went and grabbed the scuba mask and got to see some of the aquatic marine life in action. I will say, of all the places that we stopped at, Nassau in the Bahamas had the clearest water. Our next destination is another island in the Bahamas called Coco Cay, which is privately owned by Royal Caribbean, so the only way to visit this port is to be on a Royal Caribbean ship. And Coco Cay also has that pristine turquoise Caribbean water. Royal Caribbean has really built this island out to be like the perfect day. In fact, they call it Perfect Day at Coco Cay because they've got so much stuff to do for all the kids. Splash pads, water slides, beaches, volleyball courts. All of the food on the island is included. They've got giant swimming pools with swim-up bars. And I feel like this is another place that I didn't get to see everything. So typically when you stop at a port, you're getting off the ship around 9:30, and you're due back on the ship anywhere between 3 and 5 p.m. to start heading to your next port. Now the water here in Coco Cay was still pretty clear, not quite as clear as Nassau, but you did need to get a little bit further away from the beach because where all the people were in the water was stirring it up a little bit. And you really couldn't see much visibility at all right next to the beach. Our third destination was probably the prettiest from the ship, and that was Labade, which is a privately owned island by Royal Caribbean in Haiti. And it just reminded me of Hawaii with those big green mountains popping right up out in the middle of the ocean. and the dock in Labade offered a pretty good opportunity for a family photo in front of the ship. Now in Labade, we kind of relaxed a little bit more, just hung around the beach, swam in the water. I did do a little bit of snorkeling and of course more beach volleyball. And I think I forgot to mention earlier that my brother-in-law also played in college, so it's kind of a family thing. Now they did have other excursions available that we didn't do. One of them was the jet ski tour around the island, which I thought looked really cool. They also had one of the longest zip lines I think I've ever seen in person. We were actually contemplating doing this as a family. It looked like a lot of fun with a great view. I wish I would have done it because it would have looked really cool with the GoPro. Now, nobody else got excited about this except for me, but I thought it was pretty cool to see some tractors on the island here running their tram system to get people from point A to point B. And then it was time to steam on to our next port of call. And that next stop is Falmouth, Jamaica. The excursion we booked for Jamaica was called the Blue Hole, and I would 100% recommend doing the Blue Hole. My only stipulation is I wouldn't do it out of the Falmouth, Jamaica port of call. I would rather go to the Blue Hole excursion from the Ocho Rios port because from Falmouth it was about an hour and a half long bus ride. From Ocho Rios, I think it's about half that at 45 minutes. So basically you're trading time at the excursion for time exploring Jamaica's countryside in a bus. That being said, once you get there, you forget all about the long bus ride. It is absolutely spectacular. One of the coolest things I think I've ever done in my life. Right up there with another thing in Jamaica, which is the Dunn's River Falls. Both of these I would highly recommend. I actually think I might like this one a little bit better because the Dunn's River Falls, you get to be in the water, you get to climb up the waterfalls, but this one you actually get to jump in and swim, and the water is just so refreshing. It's clean. It's clear, it's not salt water. Obviously, it's not chlorinated because it's natural, but I just feel like we get so used to swimming in swimming pools that are chlorinated that we forget what it's like to actually swim in fresh water. Now, water shoes are required here, which makes sense because it gives you actually really good traction on these rocks. They weren't slippery at all. They almost kind of a sandstone feel to them. So as you're climbing up these, I didn't feel like I was going to slip at all. I felt like I had really good traction with water shoes. And as you can see here, this is why they call it the Blue Hole, because the natural water coming off of the mountains here in Jamaica, crystal clear, make a really nice Caribbean blue looking water, and just an absolute blast to swim in. So this is my sister Jen going in. This is the first kind of baby jump they give you to get warmed up. Here's Lana and me. Then it was time for the next bigger jump. And then another little baby jump right into the waterfalls. The other thing that really surprised me was the elaborate stair system that they've got back here. Not because of the quality of the stairs themselves, but just the thinking about how they got the material back here into the woods on the side of these mountains. It wasn't like they brought a cement truck in here. And I mean, you guys know this summer I made my own concrete stairs. I did 11 of them. It was a lot of work, so I can't even imagine what it took to get all the material back here. I don't know if they hand mixed it or how they got it back here, but I mean, they've got quite a few stairs back here and a lot of cement. Now this was the tallest jump of the day. I don't know, maybe 15 feet. And you can see the crazy Jamaicans jumping off of the waterfall itself straight down in, while we're all kind of scared to go off of the cement pillar jump here. Guys, I hope the video is doing this justice because I can't put into words how refreshing this water actually was. This is my daredevil nephew. This is my other nephew doing a synchronized dive with one of those crazy Jamaicans off the waterfall. And then this was the final jump of the day, which was just a little rope swing. And here you can see they gave me the smallest life jacket they had left. I think this actually belongs to Kyle from Spicer Designs.
Just before I do leave and go back, I wouldn't recommend standing underneath this because there's a very good chance it's gonna fall down.
Kyle, I can't do that.
Oh yeah, I forgot you're 6'5". You're 6'5".
This is my brother-in-law who made a perfect entry into the water. My oldest sister, my other sister, and my other brother-in-law. All right, so that wraps up all of our ports of calls. Now let's move on to food. So this is the main dining buffet. They've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner here. This is breakfast, obviously. I got pretty accustomed to having smoked salmon, eggs Benedict, and sauteed mushrooms for breakfast every morning, but they also had things like yogurt parfaits, waffles with whipped cream, eggs, sausage, hash browns, all your typical breakfast fare, as well as a pretty big assortment of breakfast pastries. Now the buffet is also open for lunch. There's literally too many things to list all of what they had available. Typically, we ended up actually going to a place up on the pool deck called El Loco Fresh. This little Mexican place allows you to get quick bites to eat. Quesadillas, tacos, burritos, chili cheese, chili con carne, black beans, chicken, pork. And then they had a toppings bar, pico de gallo, guac, cheese, sour cream, nachos. As far as dinner goes, the main buffet is open, like I said, for all 3 meals, but for dinner we typically ate in the main dining room, just a little fancier and gave us all a reason to dress up. Types of food you can expect in the main dining room: beef tenderloin, prime rib, New York strip steak, surf and turf, which is lobster tail and filet mignon, leg of lamb. So all the meals in the main dining room are 3-course meals. So you get an appetizer and a dessert, and you can even order multiple appetizers. So they have things like escargot, shrimp scampi, fried coconut shrimp, pork tacos, calamari, Caesar salads, French onion soup. The list goes on. And then for dessert, they had pies, cobblers, creme brulee, tiramisu, ice cream, baked Alaska. Now, for whatever reason, none of that sounded good to Anderson. He wanted strawberries for dessert. So they brought him a whole bowl of strawberries and 2 scoops of strawberry ice cream. I've got to say, the Royal Caribbean dining staff treats you like kings. The hospitality and attention to detail is top-notch. And I've got to give a special thanks to our waiters, Jason and Ryzen, and especially Ryzen, because we parked all the kids at one table beside us, and he did an incredible job keeping them entertained, from doing a couple magic tricks to showing them how to fold napkin animals, and even playing a little saxophone. All right, guys, so we just got back from the cruise, and I want to take a minute to talk about pricing, because it doesn't matter how nice it is, how good of a time you're going to have if you can't afford it, right? So let's talk about the dollars and cents. Now, there's a lot of things that are going to impact how expensive or inexpensive the cruise is going to be. Things like what time of year you're going to go, what size ship you're going to go on, how big of a room are you going to get, how many people are going, and then also how you book it. Are you going to book it yourself directly through the cruise line's website? Are you going to go through an outside travel agent? Are you going to go through a booking website like Expedia or Travelocity? All of these things are going to impact the final price that you're going to pay for your trip. If you are going to use a travel agent, I highly recommend looking for one that offers perks like paid gratuities or onboard credits. Speaking of onboard credits, there's one that you may not know of, and this is for Royal Caribbean specifically. I don't know if other cruise lines do it, but it is a shareholder onboard travel credit. And so if you own over 100 shares of Royal Caribbean stock, they will actually give you $100 worth of onboard credit to spend on alcohol or different excursions or things like that. Funny story about that is I found out about that probably about 8 months ago when Royal Caribbean was trading at $42 a share. I bought 100 shares. It is now trading at $125 a share. So if you take the $83 gain per share times 100 shares, I actually made about $8,300 just by buying Royal Caribbean stock, which then more than paid for our trip. Now, that's not investing advice. We happened to just get lucky because we bought cruise line stocks as they were starting to jump coming out of COVID. So that's not typical. You know, stock prices go up and down, so you could very easily lose more than the $100 travel credit that you're going to get on board. So it's not a great idea to do that, but we took a gamble and it actually paid off. Another thing worth mentioning when trying to save money is there are certain times of the year that with Royal Caribbean, kids will sail for free. Typically, this is times of the year when you'd have to pull them out of school. And I think it's under the age of 12 or 13, something like that. So, you know, definitely not during the summer, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, all of those times. If you bring a kid with you, you're going to have to pay. We ended up going over Martin Luther King weekend. So we had a 3-day weekend. So we had one less day we had to pull the kids out of school for. But something else to consider is if you go kind of in those off-peak times, if your kids are under 12, they can sail for free. Now, when you start shopping for cruises online, most cruise lines are guilty of the plus taxes and fees. So they may advertise a want to get away price, $7.99 for a 7-night cruise to the Eastern Caribbean or Western Caribbean. But what they're not including in that advertised price is your port charges and your gratuities. Royal Caribbean specifically charges $18 per day for gratuities, which covers things like your maid service and the dining staff and the bartenders and all that. They build that into the price. And then you've got port charges. I think our gratuities, I mean, if you take that $18 per day times 7 days, it worked out to $126 per person. And then port charges, that's what the ports charge the cruise line to come into port and dock the boat for the day. And for us, that was $173 per person. So right off the bat, you can add about $300 to that advertised price that they give you. So just be wary of that. All right, so now I've got my laptop here and we're gonna talk through a couple of examples, and I'm going to include the port charges and the gratuity so you get an all-in picture of what a cruise like this might cost. So like I said, there's a lot of things that can affect your overall price. So I want to give you a couple of examples depending on who's watching this video. So we're going to have 4 different room types, and we're going to be giving prices on if you're traveling with just 2 people, you know, if you don't have kids, or 2 adults and 1 child, 2 adults and 2 children. So for the first one, the cheapest way that you're going to get on a ship is in an interior room. And if you're just traveling with 2 people in an interior room, you could expect to spend about $2,700. Again, all these figures are after port charges and gratuities. If you do 2 adults and a child, $3,300. And if you do 2 adults and 2 children, that's about $3,600. Now, if you step it up to the next room, which would be a balcony room, 2 adults, $3,400. 2 adults and 1 child, $5,500. 2 adults and 2 children, $5,800. Then the next room size up, you would get a large balcony. So the balcony is a little bit deeper, a little bit wider. 2 adults, $3,500. 2 adults and 1 child is $6,900. And 2 adults and 2 children is $7,200. I don't know why the large balcony, the jump is so massive from 2 adults to 2 adults and a child, but that doesn't make sense to me. And especially when you consider what our next room is going to be is actually bigger but cheaper. And that is a junior suite. So this has much more square footage. And for 2 adults, it's going to be $4,600. For 2 adults and a child, $5,500. And for 2 adults and 2 children in a junior suite would be about $5,800. I don't know why a large balcony that's a smaller room would be so much more money than an actual junior suite. It must just be a supply and demand thing. They price it based on what's available. For reference, I was looking at cruises in January of 2025 to get these prices. Speaking of which, the price that we paid for the cruise that we just went on, nowhere near these prices. We booked them over a year ago, and I actually put what we paid on this graph as well because we booked all 3 types of rooms. My parents just had a 2 adult room. We got the large balcony and they paid about $3,000 for their room. Our room was 2 adults, 1 child, and we paid $3,300 for our room. And then both of my sisters were 2 adults and 2 children, and they paid about $4,200. So it just goes to show you that as we're coming out of COVID and people are starting to travel again, those prices are starting to go up pretty significantly. So I think there will come a point where we reach a break-even point where they have raised the prices too much and people will stop booking cruises and prices will start to come back down, but I don't think we're quite there yet. So when you take everything into account that I showed you throughout the first 23 minutes of this video, all of the destinations that you get to go to, the fine dining, the shows after dinner, everything that you get to experience while you're on the ship, it's actually a pretty affordable way to travel. If you were going to go book a beach house down in Myrtle Beach or Miami or something like that for a week, you're looking at probably $4,000 to $5,000 just for the house, let alone feeding yourself for the week, whether you decide to cook in or if you're going to go out to restaurants and get the quality of food that we got all week long, the surf and turf, the leg of lamb, all that stuff. I mean, you're going to spend a fortune eating out on top of your already expensive beachfront house. So I guess my point is a lot of people think that cruising is very expensive. And when you consider all that you're getting, it's really not that bad. So I know this video is a little bit off topic from what we normally cover on this channel, but I figured, hey, we're going on this vacation, might as well bring you guys along. I hope you enjoyed it. If somebody out there found it interesting, give me a big thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.